Hello, in this video I'll teach you how to build an MVP end to end, what are the tools to use, what are the do's and don'ts, and what are the principles to keep in mind while building the MVP. This video will highly focus on the first principles, focusing on three core points. First, faster execution. Second, continuous improvement. Third, focusing on the core problem. So let's get into it. So we'll be focusing on these seven concepts. First, we'll start with core. I'll tell you how to structure your code base and other fundamental things. Then we'll go through design aspects. What are the tools you can use? What's the design language, or what's the design aspect you should focus on while developing the MVP? Then we'll go through front end and back end. In front end and back end, we'll focus on how to set up analytics, how to set up logs, how to set up authentication, all based on the MVP focus, focusing on basically how to build the MVP. Then we'll go through database. I'll tell you how to structure your database. Then we'll go to deployment. What are the steps you should follow? What are the tools you can use? And finally, we'll go through AI, which is the core part of this MVP development, where I will tell you what are the concepts you should know, what are the precautions you should take, how to improve your response qualities, etc., etc. So let's start with the first one. The first decision you should make is choosing a stack. So what does a stack mean? Stack is basically a combination of the frameworks or programming languages that you have to use to build the app on top of it. So basically there are many stacks. There is a popular one called Mern stack. You can always also go with mean stack, Pern stack, or you can individually use Django. So before picking any stack, if you ask me which stack is the best one, I would say it doesn't matter, because the core focus of your core focus should be on solving the problem. These stacks or frameworks are just the tools to achieve that. So still, if you still need my answer, the direct answer, just go to ChatGPT, describe your idea, and it will tell you some of the suggestions you should use. Pick any of the top three and you are good to go. So instead, you should ask yourself these four questions, sorry. If I pick this X stack, can I hire people easily? Second question, are enough people using it? Does it have a community support, good community? Third question, does it have enough pre-built components? Pre-built components you will definitely need, because your goal is to build faster. If you have pre-built components, you can move faster. And the fourth question, which is the main or the best question, the most important question that you should be asking yourself is your tech person or the team comfortable with the stack you choose? So these are the four questions you should ask before picking a stack, and these are some of the options you have. In front end, you have React, Next, Angular, or Vue. In back end, you have Express, Django, Flask, and Fast API. So this was regarding framework or stack. So the next thing you should focus on is the code quality. See, you can't ignore the code quality thinking that it's just MVP. There are 2-3 reasons. First being, many startups, when if the MVP explodes, many startups build on top of MVP. They don't rewrite the code base to some extent, or I would say to some days after the launch of MVP. If the MVP goes well, the launch goes well, then they don't rewrite the code base. They keep the code base built on top of it. So you can't ignore the code base quality thinking that yeah, it's just MVP. And the other thing is, if the launch goes too well, you have hundreds and thousands of users coming, then the code base, the server, or like I would say, the app will definitely break. You can't make a perfect MVP. In the war room like scenario where you have thousands of users coming and there is some bug, some rate limit issue, something has gone wrong, you will regret that you didn't focus on the code quality. In the war room like scenario where the immediate fix is needed, if the code quality is too bad, then you will suffer, you will regret that. So focus on the code quality. Regarding folder structure, just go with the popular one or the one you are following, one you like. Let's go with MVC, model view controller. Then coming to repositories, go with monorepo. If there is something particular where the scenario needs multiple repositories, then just go with just go with other repositories, like multiple repositories, but as a default stick with monorepo. Then you should have some sort of documentation for new developers coming in, or for yourself when you look at it at future. It doesn't have to be too detailed, but some form of documentations are needed. So that was about the core, or the part one of this video. Next we'll focus on the design. So let's get to second chapter of our video, which is UI UX. Now if you asked me the same question before AI, my answer would be different. I'll tell you why. You should have some basic style guidelines, and your product should somewhat feel premium. I'll tell you what that is. Before AI, if you had to design a UI, you should write every single CSS styling with your hand. You need a developer who works on the UI alone for some days. But with AI, you don't need that. You just define your style guidelines. Go to any popular UI design libraries like Dribble, pick one design inspiration, feed it to your AI, feed both your style guidelines, like which is your primary color, which is your secondary color, which is your font, etc., and your design inspirations, and you will get a reasonably good UI. It won't be like a Apple style finish, but you will get a reasonably good UI. One of like our startup founders, or one of my clients, says that my product, yeah, it should focus on the core problem, it should be minimal, but all my friend circle will see the product when I launch it. It also affects my reputation. So UI is something that is the UI is the judging parameter for some people, or it can contribute to a lot on judgment. So you should focus on UI. Don't over design, but as I explained, fix the style guidelines, then feed it to your AI model, feed it to the feed all your inspirations to your AI, and get it to some level. That's all. And next aspect you should focus on is getting the design elements. I'll write it down. Now what do I mean by design elements? Design elements are like buttons, forms, input fields, etc., etc. Now never ever design this from scratch, because you are building an MVP. Don't design from scratch. Build on top of existing ones. Use something like ShadCN, use something like Chakra UI, use Material UI. They already have pre-built components. Just use them. Never ever design elements from scratch when you are building an MVP. So this was regarding the UI UX part. Next, let's go to the front end. So let's start with the front end. This is the third chapter of our series. I don't have much things to explain in the front end, because I have explained about the UI UX and design elements in the last part. I'll just go through some of the fundamentals, and we'll go to backend. First point, make the user's journey as smooth as possible. So what do I mean by this? User, whenever he's on any screen, he should be clear that this is what he's here for, which is the core problem that you are solving, and there should be a clear pathway for user to reach that point, you reach that problem solving screen, and user should be able to test it out without any barriers. This is what I mean by user flow, smooth user flow. And next, do not put onboarding forms if it is not necessary. Directly take the user from authentication, from landing page to authentication to your core problem solving feature. If you can do, if you if you can skip the onboarding steps, then this is the best thing you can do. while, because you're just testing the MVP. These are the two things that you should keep in mind. Next part, authentication. Now, in some of the apps, I'm not saying in every app or in many apps, in some of the apps, you don't need authentication. Obviously, you should take care of rate limiting, that is definitely there. But try if you can give some of your features, or I would some of your solution to the problem without authentication, or try to make it optional, or some way that user can feel or user can just experience the solution that you are giving to the problem without authentication. Try to do it, because authentication is itself a small barrier to some users. So try to do it, or else for authentication give at least two or three options. Email and Google is definitely needed. And one more suggestion here, I want to recommend is, don't build authentication from scratch, because authentication is not your core product. Your core product is something else. So get authentication. You can get authentication from Clerk, something like Clerk, where you can get 3 4 types of authentications easily in 1 or 2 clicks. You can set up authentication within an hour. So do that, and follow the earlier points I mentioned. And last, that I want to mention is, don't waste your time in unwanted animations. I have seen developers who are very enthusiastic in launching their product. They want their product to be super high quality, and and they want the user to feel like he's in some 3D world, or some super space animations, or some super space environment. Now, that is good for Apple like company. They want to give that feeling, but the goal of your MVP is to solve a problem, not do some animations or give very very good experience to user. You're just solving the problem. So don't waste your time in making the animations or making something very good. Just focus on the problem. Now I have another suggestion, like there is a popular website called Linear, which helps note taking, etc etc. You have already heard of it, I guess. What they have done is, they have, in the landing page, they have explained their product by screenshots. This is some of the companies do this, but what they have done is, they have made their landing page interactive. We can actually use the product, not 100%, not with 100% efficiency, like not with 100% features, but we can use their product and get to know what they have built before even signing up. Try to build this, or at least have a screenshot or a screen recording of your demo in the landing page, so at least user knows that yes, this is what he's signing up for. This is a one suggestion that I have. And I guess that pretty much covers front end. Now let's move to back end. So let's start with back end. We have already covered front end, we have already covered UI design, and we have already covered core principles. Now in backend, I want to focus on four main parameters, four main points. Architecture. One of my client came to me saying, my previous developer had built me an MVP in microservice architecture, and they charged them 10 lakh rupees. Now, I don't know if I should laugh on this, but you don't need microservice in an MVP. With microservice, you need more people, you need more resources, and it costs more. So in 99% of the times, I would say even 99.99% of the times, you only need monolith. So always go with monolith, unless some exceptions, but I would say in 99.99% of the cases, always go with monolith. Now, logs. No matter how good you build, your product will definitely in some or the other case will break. And when it breaks, you need to know why it broke. So logs at that moment becomes very crucial. Again, following the first principle, Never ever start writing logs from scratch. There are tools like Sentry, just use them. It will hardly take half an hour or 10 minutes to set it up, but never ever write logs from scratch. It will take a lot of time, and a lot of focus will go on only on writing logs. So use something like Sentry and get it set up. Next, coming to rate limiting, which is the third part. This I feel is the most important part in our in the backend, because you, especially you are building with AI. Before, it used to be very small concept, because maximum that could happen was your server would go down as an MVP. That is okay. Not a lot of users are using your product. It's just a test. That's okay. But now with AI, you have your credit card linked to your AI model, right? So you don't want users to use your AI unlimited times, or spam requests, or some bug to be explored. So always use two types of rate limiting. One, user level rate limiting. You have a user who has created account in your platform. You will rate limit that user based on per day usage, based on per hour user or usage, or based on number of usage, any parameter. One, user level rate limiting. Second, IP level rate limiting. Now with IP level rate limiting, again the same parameters apply: per hour usage, per maximum number of usage, or per day usage. Put some rate limit on your AI usage, on especially on AI usage, because that is linked to your credit card, right? That's regarding rate limit. If you want to explore more on rate limit, I have a small dedicated video on rate limit itself. I'll put that in description. Now moving to last part, which is analytics. Analytics is what decides if your MVP is good, if it is worth carrying on or not. So a lot of people use Google Analytics, which is good, or you can even use PostHog. PostHog is what, two layers above Google Analytics. PostHog provides some of the features that are not in Google Analytics. That something like screen recording. So whenever a user comes, he does he performs some activities on a platform. Those activities are screen recorded. So after 2 days, if you want to view what your users have done on your platform, you can just go to its session highlights and check the user's history. So analytics is something you should set up before launching your MVP. These are some of the 4 points that I felt that should be covered in the backend. Now let's move to deployment and then move to AI features. There is one more chapter we need to discover on before we move to DevOps and AI, that is database. There isn't much niche thing to talk about following the first principle, but I have two of these suggestions I have listed here. I'll just go through it one by one. No matter what you do, your business logics will change. Some entirely change. Some change may be major, some change may be minor, some may entirely change. But business logics will definitely change, and your database will change over time. So don't waste your time in engineering the database. Yes, you should have some clear path of what your product will look like, or what your product will look like in 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. You should engineer database according to that, but don't over engineer, because definitely some or the other business logics will change, and you will definitely need to restructure your database. Second, when you have 10 users, or let's say 100 users, you don't need database query optimization. I have seen developers who are wasting 2 hours, 3 hours on optimizing 2 or 3 queries when they have 10 users. So better go get some users before optimizing your query. Now I don't want to go into detail of SQL and NoSQL, because that is technical part. In one line, I would say, whichever you are familiar with, just go with that. It really doesn't matter with the MVP, as I explained in first part. So just pick the one which is easy for you, which you are familiar with. And that's all that I want to explain the database. Now let's go to DevOps and AI. So let's move to the sixth part or sixth chapter of this series, which is DevOps, which is again taking your MVP to the user. Now actually there is a very funny story. I joined a team who were building a product and they hadn't yet launched their MVP. And the best part of them is, or I would say funny part of that is, they were building CI/CD pipeline. I don't know who came up with this idea, but without even launching, without even building the prototype correctly, in the MVP stage, they were with three developers. They were building CI/CD pipeline. So don't build. Do not build CI/CD pipelines in your MVP stage. Just don't build. Now, moving on to where you should deploy your prototype. Now, imagine this from first principles perspective. Your goal is to take your prototype to users so that users can use it. That's all. For the MVP stage, you don't need load balancer, you don't need API gateway. What you need is just a server that hosts your code base and lets users use it. Now, if you are not very familiar with AWS or again Google Cloud or Azure, then just deploy it on Vercel. I would highly recommend to deploy on Vercel, or else if you are very good, if you have at least 2 or 3 years of experience in AWS, then just spin up an instance and deploy it. That's all. That's all you need. We have already covered analytics, logs, etc., in backend part, so we don't need to repeat it here again. So I guess that's all in DevOps. Now let's move to AI part, and there are a lot of things to discuss there. So let's get to the final part of this series, which is AI. Now I know most of you are here for this part, or most of you, maybe many of you, skipped the other part of the video and reached here, but I would like to disappoint you. Now there are two ways of looking at it. One is from MVP angle, where you are solving a problem. Two, from a product angle, where you are constantly improving things. Now all the points that are listed on my screen, or there are many other points, are more related to product angle than the MVP angle. I'll highly recommend you to implement all this in the MVP, but not focus on improving the quality. Launch it first, then implement it. Now I'll just go through all these in one line. RAG, you need that for context, you need that for quality output. Error handling, from UI perspective, do good error handling from front end scenario. Show alternatives to user, show what went wrong instead of boring loaders or stuck screens or blank screens. These are from UI point of view. From logs or backend point of view, always check your logs, work on the errors. And from backend perspective, you have all your logs stored, so you can anyways come back to those errors and check. Now prompt versioning, again, you don't need lot of improvement in while you are launching the product, but you definitely need when you are converting that into a full product. Human in the loop, again, very crucial. Now coming and reducing latency, this point I would highly recommend to skip, because it's okay to have latency in your MVP, because you are just trying it out. Then finally, everyone knows what is output validation. I guess the name already suggests that, and structured outputs is obviously another way of explaining it. There are many other things like fallback handling, if AI fails, or there is caching. But I would highly recommend you to go to my YouTube, and there is a playlist called Building Production Ready AI, where I've explained all these concepts very well with examples, with explanation. Please do check out that for full explanations. And I hope you like this video, and follow me, subscribe me for more such content.